leaders of the world's wealthiest nations have promised to do more to tackle coronavirus and climate change. As they wrapped up the G7 summit in Cornwall, let's go live to our political editor, Andrew Clennell, who's travelling with the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Andrew, good morning, good afternoon where you are. There was significant focus on China during the meetings.
Yes, good evening where I'm in fact, Pete, but that was certainly the case, and I think that was a result that Scott Morrison wanted. It was certainly also what Joe Biden wanted, but we know about that trilateral meeting between Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, Joe Biden, the US President, and our Prime Minister Scott Morrison about 24 hours ago, Australian time, all about China. They called it about security in the Indo-Pacific. We also got a strongly worded communique out of the G7 leaders this morning with several mentions of China, whether it be about the treatment of the Uyghur people or Hong Kong, and also around trade. But it seems there wasn't unanimity the whole time on the strong message sent to China out of this forum. And the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi let that slip in his discussions with Scott Morrison when he met him ahead of their bilateral meeting. Have a listen to this.
Perhaps the only difference of views was the intensity of the message to China. And I think, but in the end, sanctions will agree about that.
So a bit of a revelation there from the Italian PM to our Prime Minister about differences in view in terms of the intensity of the message around China. So I asked Scott Morrison about this at his press conference. Prime Minister, the Italian Prime Minister said to you this morning the only difference of views was the intensity of the message to China. Was he referring to your view as opposed to his, or were there other countries that weren't as keen as you in America and the UK on such an intense message on China, as he put it?
He was referring to the G7 discussions. He wasn't referring to any discussions that Australia was involved in. As you know, the G7 communique is produced by the G7 nations, and Australia is an extension partner. But look, we had very frank discussions about those issues today in the Indo-Pacific. I had very, I think, important discussions yesterday in the trilateral meeting I had that we initiated and sought with both the United States and the United Kingdom. So these issues and were very present at this gathering, particularly for countries like Japan, ourselves and India, where the Indo-Pacific is our home.
Now, I note the Opposition Foreign Affairs spokeswoman Penny Wong has been saying in Australia that it was disappointing that the first face-to-face meeting between Scott Morrison and Joe Biden was a trilat and not a bilat. So I asked Scott Morrison, I also asked him yesterday, whose idea was this? And yesterday he had said it was mutual, but Australia had been keen. This time he reveals it was Australia's idea. This show of strength behind Australia, facing economic coercion from China. He wanted the UK in the room as well, our old wartime allies joining together with one message. I asked you yesterday whose idea was the trilat. Now, Penny Wong has said it's disappointing we didn't have a bilat with Joe Biden, that you didn't have that. What's your reaction to that, and can you tell me whose idea was the trilat?
Well, it was ours. I said that yesterday. We initiated the trilateral. It was important to discuss the issues I was seeking discussion in relation to the Indo-Pacific, both with the United States and the United Kingdom. And so that is what we sought, and that is what we did. And I think that was a very useful meeting.
So Joe Biden also held a press conference this afternoon, English time, and he was quizzed about China and Russia predominantly by American journalists. But he spoke about not just China being a concern, but this concept of autocracies and liberal democracies and who gets the upper hand. That's what he says he's concerned about in dealing with China.
I know this is going to sound somewhat prosaic, but I think we're in a contest, not with China per se, but a contest with autocrats, autocratic governments around the world, as to whether or not democracies can compete with them in the rapidly changing 21st century. And I think how we act and whether we pull together as democracies is going to determine whether our grandkids look back 15 years from now and say, did they step up?
So Joe Biden wanting to make it clear that he's engaged in foreign policy now in a way that I guess he'd argue Donald Trump was not, and that they can't fall behind China in a sense. But it's a tense issue, isn't it? It makes you feel tense hearing these different powers at each other.